Horsepower and money.
I want both.
Yes.
I want a lot of both.
So we're talking bikes. How much horsepower can I get for the least amount of money per category? Obviously, if we don't break it down, it doesn't make any sense. So we're going to look at how much horsepower per dollar you can get. And then Terry wrote a book. I have 4 lines.
I brought some notes.
So he came prepared. I came with pre-existing knowledge. So we're going to go about this and see what's going on.
So first category, so we talk touring bikes.
And I specified with Terry what a touring bike is, and he said that's all bikes that you can put saddlebags on.
No.
That's exactly what he said, and that's what I got.
I said, in order to be classified as a touring bike, some bikes don't come with saddlebags and a top box, so the price must include saddlebags and a top box.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So like if the bike is well, we'll get into it, and then we'll see where we end up.
Perfect. So who goes first?
You go first, because I've got ammo here, so let's see.
Okay. The first direction that popped into my mind, but that's not my choice.
Okay. No, I have, of course. Let's discuss.
my first direction was the Juggernaut Kawasaki HT.
Of course.
We're talking 210 horsepower, supercharged leader bike. But by the time I put the bags and everything on there, I'm at 32K. Canadian.
Yes,
so that's
Canadian pricing.
So that's fake money for you Americans.
Yeah.
It's about half. Anyways, so then I was still on the Kawasaki bandwagon and the ZX14. The ZX14 is still a 210 horsepower bike with 1400 cc. By the time I put all the bags on it, I'm in the low 20s. 21, 22, by the time I have the bags on that bike, if I even hit the 20s. I did think Hayabusa, but they never even brought the Hayabusa up for 185.
That's the thing. But a ZX10...
Yeah, but a ZX10 is a super sport bike. That's not a touring bike.
Exactly. Okay, good.
A ZX14 is considered a touring bike. It is a sport touring bike.
Okay.
So my final horsepower per dollar for touring was ZX14. Okay. That's the cheapest horsepower you could buy. Prove me wrong.
You need to put bags and a top box on it.
Yeah.
Which gets expensive. So...
yeah, but still we're like 21 grand for a brand new bike.
Okay, but what's the dollar per horsepower number? Don't worry, I've got it covered. So, same thing. So this is what I was thinking. Let's start with Cowie Train. So I also went with H2, but obviously if you're over $30,000 and you're getting about 200 horsepower, you know that the dollar per horsepower is not necessarily going to be worth it. How much power, how many ponies for the least amount of money? So then I thought, same thing, but instead of the ZX14, I went with the Concourse. Right?
Yeah, but the Concourse doesn't rev like the ZX14.
It doesn't have to.
It's only like 160 horse.
This is a touring bike, but again, it's dollar per horsepower. So the Concourse has 158 horsepower. It is Canadian, 19.8, okay? With the top box.
I'm still winning.
19.8, no you're not. Because 19.8 with the top box, dollar per horsepower is $125 per pony. Okay?
I'm
and
at
with
100.
the bags.
I'm at 100.
How?
I'm at 21 grand, 210 horsepower. That's 100.
For the ZX14 with bags.
With bags, yeah.
Well,
I'm at 100. I fucking win.
Where's how much is the bike new?
It's 16,799, and yeah, for 3 bags for 4 grand, I can make that happen.
Okay, fair.
So I fucking win.
Okay.
To be fair,
now I just want to quickly touch on some other bikes that
honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions. So
because you admit that you lost this category.
Yeah, well, I want to see your numbers, which you don't.
Point Jeremie.
He doesn't have numbers.
I have numbers.
What's tied for the Concourse in an actual sport touring bike, not a sport bike, is the Ninja 1000. Okay, Ninja 1000 has 138 horsepower, so not as many ponies, but it's 17.3 with a top box, so it's cheap, which makes it exactly 125.3 horsepower, tied with the Concourse. So for my picks, those are dollar per horsepower, great actual sport touring bikes, so you can get a lot of ponies for not a lot of money. Honorable mentions, Goldwing only has 125 ponies and it's like 33 grand. We're talking $250 a horsepower, so if you want ponies, don't buy a wing. The interesting one that's kind of in the middle, the S1000 XR.
Yeah, which is an odd bike.
An odd bike, but it's got 17-inch wheels, touring bike.
Yeah.
Even with all 3 bags, a lot of people tour on them. It's $140 a horsepower. For the ZX14, I didn't use that as touring. I would use that in my sport, for my sport bike, for one of them.
Sport bike insinuates you have to have a race series.
No.
There's no race series for ZX14.
Okay, I mean,
I was going by insurance rules.
I just went with what they called them on the website. If it was under sport, it went into sport. If it was under touring, it went into touring. But that's fine. So you might be right on the ZX14.
One thing that we should really note, though, is 4 of the bikes we picked are all Kawasaki's.
It's true.
All 4 bikes are Kawasaki's, so we could officially crown Kawasaki the king of horsepower per dollar on the touring bikes.
For touring, and I think that kind of our brains kind of went to the same direction.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, right away you're like, okay, they've got the H2, they've got the ZX14, they've got all these bikes that do serious numbers for not a lot of money. So I think that's probably safe to say, in general, you're doing good with going with Team Green.
Category number 2.
Do you want to do sport or do you want to do dirt? Let's do dirt.
Dirt.
It's kind of weird.
Dirt bike. Ding 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 ding. And I didn't split between 4-stroke and 2-stroke.
Neither did I.
Because they're the same. And then let's agree that all the bikes are worth the same freaking money. So they're all within a couple $100 of each other, unless you go with the European bikes like the KTM and stuff like that. They're more money, so they are obviously out. And so we're talking Japanese bikes. And then the other thing too that you have to note, the top horsepower bike this year is the YZ 450F. That being said, like 2 horsepower separates the top from the lowest bike.
Well, sort of. So a lot of these bikes don't actually have claimed horsepower. They have rear wheel numbers on dynos. Basically, against with the Cowie stuff, because we're on the Cowie train, let's say a KX 450, rear wheel horsepower is 50 on dynos, which means claimed horsepower at the crank is probably going to be about 60.
Yeah.
Right? Now that bike, looking at my notes, is Canadian, is $10,749. Which gives you $179 per.
You went like to the.
Well, we're talking dollars per horsepower, so we got to do the math. Otherwise, it's nonsense.
Approximate dollar per horsepower.
Well, that's especially on dirt. It makes sense. Like, how are you going to get more? Well, some bikes are a little bit different, and that's a guesstimate of what at the crank is going to be. Since you mentioned KTM,
yep,
I went with their biggest 2-stroke, the 300.
The 300,
right, to see kind of how much it is, but it's more expensive. It's $12,000. It's $12,100.
You have to note though. I would argue, I get it, we're just talking about horsepower, but on the dirt bikes, it's almost irrelevant because what the KTM comes stock with in terms of everything else is ahead of the Japanese bike.
But 100%, but we're not, it's dollar per horsepower. This is what we want to talk about, so this is what we're doing. But that being said, it's got, again, 51 rear wheel horsepower, so about 60 at the crank, let's guesstimate. But that makes it closer to $200 per horsepower. It's more expensive per pony for the KTM. From what I've gathered, the CRF 450R that has 55 rear wheel horsepower this year. That's pretty good. That's on the dyno. That's on Cycle World or Dirt Bike World, whatever. I found like dyno charts. 55 at the rear wheel, which means 65 at the crank. If we're comparing to the other bikes, that bike, which is weird because I'm not a huge Honda guy, but that bike at $10,800 is $167 per horsepower, which, from what I found, is the best dollar per horsepower for a dirt bike. Which is weird because you wouldn't really not necessarily think that because there's so many other bikes that are like the KTM's and you've got these weird betas and everything like that.
Well, I want to throw a weird bike in there that is not in the running, but in the research I was like, what the fuck?
What is it?
The ATK Ultimate 700.
I heard about that. I saw that too.
This is a single-cylinder 700 2-stroke that made 78 horsepower.
That'll scoot.
Just a monster. They haven't been making it for like 13 years. The company went belly up. But that's just retarded.
I'm retarded?
I bet you can't buy it though now. Or if there is some, they're probably stupid money. So I think you win with the CRF.
Well, and there's the 690 stuff and the 701 stuff too. But as far as dirt bikes go,
it's not a dirt bike. That's a dual sport.
So we're in agreement. So CRF 450.
So perfect. So I win the sport touring category or touring, whatever you want to call it. And Terry wins the category he loves the most, dirt bikes. What's the next category, Terry?
Sport bikes.
Sport bikes means they're built to go fast.
Yeah. So,
I interpret it as there has to be a race series, or else it's not a super sport.
okay.
But why don't you take the lead on this one?
Okay, so again, with your good idea of sport bikes, the ZX14. So the ZX14, no bags, anything like that, power. So the ZX14 has 208 horsepower. Mm-hmm. Now it's kind of like a Busa, right? So do I consider it a sport bike? Is there a race series? No, but that's kind of why I'm putting it first. Like we can differentiate, but the actual dollar per horsepower without bags, like you had in sport touring, because I've never seen a top box on a ZX14, so.
I made one.
We'll see. I made one. You could. You got a big enough axe and enough money, you can do whatever you want. But ZX14, $18,299. Dollar per horsepower is $87.96. Under $90 per pony. You know how much a real horse is? A lot more than $90.
Did
so
you know,
that's bang. That's a ton of money.
Let's insert a fun fact there.
Please.
Did you know that the average horse has 15 horsepower?
This is news to me. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, horsepower is kind of a weird equation, anyways. But if that was cool, what did you have in mind?
Well, originally I was on the ZX10 bandwagon, which is 203 horsepower. But this was dollar per horsepower. And I know you cannot spec out the S1000RR at the base price. I know that does not exist.
You can buy it.
But the S1000RR with 205 horsepower is a base of 18,995.
It is.
Which would make it the highest horsepower per dollar bike.
For true racing sport class bikes, yes. There's an honorable mention. So that bike works out to exactly $91.76 per pony for an actual super bike, right? So like a super bike, racetrack bike.
It's a race bike. Perfect.
And that is realistically at base stock bike, which you technically can buy. That's probably going to be the best. You get the R with this. Forget the Honda, the CBR. I mean, that thing's not enough power. More expensive. You got the Honda, even the ZX10. By the time you do it, it's not. It's more expensive.
And it's more money than the BMW.
It's more money than the base BMW.
It's 2 horsepower less.
Yes, but we get into some cool things. The close to that, very close to that, the Gixxer 750.
See, and that didn't even cross my mind.
See, that would popped into my mind. So I was like, that's kind of weird because it's got more power than the 600 and it's not that much more expensive. It's actually a close runner-up. 148 horsepower, $13,399, so like $13,400, so pretty cheap for the bike. Works out to $90.50 per pony. So for sub 1,000 cc, that's a lot of bike. Now it's a little long in the tooth, but that one's pretty good. But I think you're probably right. From the stuff that I looked at, the Busa, neat, but it's $120 per pony.
Yeah.
So
because they never changed.
But compare the ZX14 to the Busa, the ZX14 destroys it. So if ZX14 overall power to pony on like a bike, I think that's the best. I think that you're getting the most power per pony, not necessarily sport bike. I'm not saying that's general, but an actual sport bike, I would say the S1000RR in base form, which would be weird to buy, but technically you're getting the most ponies for the least amount of money. I would agree.
So I think for the third category, it's a tie. We're both at the S1000RR in base form that you will never find.
Unless you special order it like a weirdo. Then you could.
And they are weirdos.
All right, now this is where it's going to get interesting.
Category number 4. Category number 4 is for all the beans. We're going to decide who's better. And I obviously know it's myself. So let's bring Terry to realize it too. What's category number 4, Terry?
Adventure bikes.
Adventure motherfucking bikes. This is where I live.
So I did the numbers, but it's for him. Because I know he wants to know about how many ponies he gets for $1 on his KTM.
The KTM is we don't even need to talk about anything else.
The 1290 Adventure. Do you have the S or the R?
I got the S.
Perfect, because that's the one you should have. KTM Super Adventure S, 160 ponies at Canadian price of $21,499. That's $134 per pony. That takes the cake for the adventure bikes. And that is the one that I chose because I knew it. Just like because he rides one, so good for him. But there's some other cool bikes in that category. So that one wins.
That I agree with. So
$1 per pony.
We agree that the KTM wins. and we both agreed on the KTM, but I own the KTM, so I win the whole competition.
But
So
wait.
what are the honorable mentions?
But wait.
Okay.
Having done the math, I wanted him to feel good about something.
Uh-oh.
Because there's a new bike this year, the Ducati Multistrada V4.
Did you factor in the maintenance?
Oh, I did not. We're talking MSRP and we're talking ponies.
But you just don't want to own the fucking...
Now that bike
What's the
has
horsepower?
170 ponies.
No.
It sure does, and it's 22,395 Canadian, which brings it in at $131 per pony, just beating out the KTM that he owns.
And it... No.
Yes?
No.
100%. Yep. I hate to break it to you, but that's a new bike, so you didn't know last year, and that's fine when you bought yours. But now you know. Now, it is a Ducati, and there's a whole, would I buy that one? Look, if we're talking dollars per pony an adventure bike, that one takes the cake. But what would you buy? Clearly, you bought the KTM.
You wouldn't buy the Ducati.
I wouldn't buy any Ducati.
I would.
That's not the point.
The only Ducati I would buy is a Ducati I want to look at.
So, look, I think we're pretty close, but the dollar figures, they do stack up.
What's the difference?
$3 per pony.
Yeah,
but it's still better.
But you're gonna on your first maintenance with a Ducati, that's washed.
We're not talking about that. We're going for you won the first, I won the second, we tied, and I think I just won the last category. So a little bit of research goes a long way. And I hate to break it to you, but yeah, the Ducati does take it, $4 per pony. There's a whole bunch of other things going on, but I think that settles it. I think you're darn close though. Second place is just the first place loser, and I'm proud of you.
So the good thing is today we learned that Terry can't do actual research.
I can do math though.
And horsepower per dollar was a dumb subject. So I think we should wrap this up because I was right and Terry's wrong.
Yeah, we'll go with that. But the math doesn't lie. But hey, everyone's a winner riding motorcycles. And especially when you get that many ponies, honestly, any of these bikes would be pretty rad.